Hello, everyone, and welcome to another virtual lunch and learn. Today we have Michael with us. He's the director of UX. Uh, he'll be talking about intro to design thinking, empathize, and define. I welcome everyone to utilize our Q&A and our chat feature on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, I'll be sure to let Michael know, and he'll be sure to answer them. All right, Michael, thank you. Take it away.
All right, excellent. Is my screen sharing here?
Yes, your video and audio are coming in, but we do not see your screen.
Okay, let me fix that. I went to full screen there.
There we go.
All right, you can see it now.
I see your PowerPoint window, yes.
Excellent. All right, well, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining me on a Friday here. I'm going to give you a basic intro on design thinking. So we'll start top level, and we're really going to concentrate on empathize and define. That's the goal for today. We can maybe get into another one, in the future. We'll see if this becomes a series, but today we're going to kind of focus on the beginning of that process of design thinking. But before we do that, wanted to get in and start off by talking about your brain. Quick intro. So the left brain versus right brain, you've probably heard this before in the past. And I'm thinking of a quick kind of icebreaker here. Let's see if we can get some chat going. If we can have everybody who's on, just if you had to choose one, which one would you kind of consider yourself more left brain or right brain dominant? Got the left brain, the logic, science, sense of time, language. Right brain, the creative side, art, intuition, imagination. Sometimes I look at this as like remembering people's names or remembering faces. Maybe you're better at one or the other. We can kind of start there. Give it about maybe 30 seconds or so and see if we get any responses, and Jordan will read them off for us once we have a total.
I'm just waiting for those to come in now, but personally, I think I'm a left side, the blue, the logic. I'm very, very logic oriented.
There you go. Yeah. The analytical side.
Right. I can't draw for my life. I'm not very artistic that way. We did have one come in though. We have a left brain from Stephen.
Okay. All right. And so that's fine, actually, whether you're left brain or right brain. It's probably a myth anyways, if you Google this and read up on it. This was sort of an older idea, or at least an older concept, that you would have one side of your brain be more dominant. Most of these studies show that people use both sides. And what I kind of find working with people from all different walks, working with tech side, accounting side, whatever it might be, people are usually a lot more creative than they give themselves credit for. There's a lot of creative problem solving you have to go through. So even if you're kind of going through an analytical process, you have to be kind of creative to think of a new way to solve that problem or whatever it might be. So there's a lot more crossover than we think. So with that kind of intro, let's kind of think about that one. When we apply it to design thinking, that might be one of the first things people think of. Oh, that's for designers. Well, actually, it's not. It's really kind of a top level methodology of approaching a certain issue or problem. So this is the definition has been put out there in the world. This idea of an iterative process in which you seek to understand your users, challenge assumptions. That'll be really important. We'll talk about that. Redefine problems and create innovative solutions, which you can prototype and test. So that is a big part of the whole life cycle of design thinking. And when we see that kind of laid out, and there's some great information out there in the world. So this is kind of taken from an article that is out on the interactiondesign.org. This concept that goes through a linear process to empathize, to really understand those users. What do they need to accomplish? What is important to them? How will the product then work and meet those business goals and the user's goals? We have to define that. Then you ideate, experiment with UX strategies, UI patterns, solve the problem and help visualize that. How can we start to turn that into something? We can develop a prototype to do that. How can we quickly get to something that feels real? And now we can really start to determine what's working and what's not. And now we can test. We can work with our clients. We can work with stakeholders. Getting to the actual end users is always super valuable because actually anybody that we're engaging with, whether it's the project internally, if it's working with a client, everybody is part of that process. So this is that top line methodology, kind of end to end. But today we're really going to focus on the first part of that, empathize and define, because when we apply this to any kind of discovery process, no matter what this is happening, and it's not to say this whole life cycle can't happen within a discovery process, it certainly can, but we know we're going to always empathize and try to understand our users, and we have to define what we're trying to accomplish before we can ideate, prototype, or test. We have to do these first things. So a misconception here when we think about technology as well is, wait, IT consultancy and design thinking, that can't be a thing that goes together. Well, it is. And the reason it is because design thinking is for everybody. And everybody involved can take advantage of this. This can be within larger groups, smaller groups. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach this, because it's really just a methodology on how we think, how we learn, how we listen, how we gather information is where we start. And to break that misconception a little further is, like in the old days, this is sort of how things were happening, right? You have tech sort of ruling the decisions. The business wants a thing, technology says, yeah, happy to get to that eventually. And then all of a sudden you have users that are like, hey, this doesn't necessarily work for me. The end users kind of got what they got at that point, and you didn't actually get to speak, talk, interact, and collaborate as a larger team and bring those users into the conversation and really try to understand what we're trying to accomplish. And that's what design thinking tries to do right up front. So looking at like a typical structure, this is a lot of the ways that improving engages. Done this before, even in my previous life before improving. We've got a kind of trifecta here of, a project manager, business analyst, some kind of role that is managing things and really speaking for the business and trying to understand everything that the business wants to accomplish. We've got our kind of more creative UX UI lead involved as well, really looking at the user side of things. And then you've got either your TA, your SA, that technical solution architect, bringing in that technology voice. And these three roles are constantly collaborating throughout this discovery process to make sure that we're leaving no stone unturned, and we're actually gathering all the information that we need to do to properly define what we're trying to accomplish. And so some of the different ways we engage, and kind of wanted to, before we get into the true method and apply it, wanted to kind of break this down and think about when you are engaging with a consultancy like Improving, there's a few different ways you can do that. And typically like a staff aug type of approach is going to give you a particular role. They're going to get inserted into a system. But when you look at something that might be more project-based and you're trying to accomplish building a larger project, you're bringing in a larger team, there's this idea of being really good at execution and then being a true strategic partner. And we obviously provide both in Improving. And I think when you engage any kind of vendor and you're looking for any type of experience like this, having a strategic partner is very valuable, obviously, in the process. And it's not to say a consultant coming into a staff can't bring this methodology as well, but seeing it kind of come together as a strategic partnership is where you got a lot more involvement and you have a lot more leadership on that kind of vendor side of things. So if there are any questions here, I could certainly field them if anybody has any before we get into truly looking at how we empathize.
No questions have come in yet, Michael.
Okay, no problem, no problem. So how do we do that? Well, we really start by talking and listening. And you've probably, anybody who's been involved in a process like this sort of knows how these conversations start, but when we apply a design thinking to them, we're really trying to understand things in a different way and from many different points of view. So the goal of setting aside assumptions is really important. We need to obtain those insights, really understand this world that the users have to be in. It's not our world. We don't know that business. We don't know, say, those applications or what these users are working with on a daily basis. Taking like an intranet, for example, I'll use an intranet example here a few times as we talk about that, but it also could be any kind of site, a website, application, whatever it might be. We are trying to wear the hat of the user and really understand what they're trying to accomplish and do. And we do this by observing and talking with the different stakeholders and hopefully the end users as much as possible. We really want to put aside all those assumptions because those assumptions tend to distort the research. We come in with a pre-knowledge of, oh, we know what this client needs, or we know somebody needs a system like this. It's the same for everybody. This is that type of business. It's done. And that's not necessarily the case at all. We have to really learn about the real problems of those current users. There always have some unique insight that they can bring. And the idea of observation instead of judging, kind of the same concept there, that we really have to put those assumptions aside, take in the real information and not try to judge it based on past experience. So we can be fully objective is when we start to kind of see through the eyes of the users. This opens us up to those new possibilities and starting to problem solve. That, like I mentioned before, the client, if it's the stakeholders, if it's the subject matter experts that we're speaking to, they're the experts. So we really have to listen to them, take in that information, and have that meaningful dialogue so we can kind of bounce those ideas and start to get there. And once we go through the process, we want to be able to start to innovate, but we have to get that information documented down and do the research in the beginning. So once we understand those experiences, we can really then start to solve for them. This brings in that true trifecta that I kind of looked at in the beginning. These roles are all collaborating now. We're collaborating together, looking at that information objectively and working with that user set and those stakeholders or one or the other to accomplish this. And the big kind of thought here is that if this was some automated process, we wouldn't need to do this because, if we were auto mechanics, we would just be replacing that part, over and over again, and that would be the process, but it's not like that. We're here to kind of solve those unique things because anything we design is different because of the company, what the company does, how they work, what the culture is. All those things have anything to do. If it's not the company, it's the product. There's unique things about the product, and that means there's unique things about those end users. That's what we need to capture up front. And that's why the empathy is so important to start the process. So let's quickly apply this to a scenario within a discover phase that might come up where we could go down one path if we don't use design thinking, but how we might end up at a different goal if we do. So we take that kind of statement about what design thinking is, and now we apply it to what we need to do. So we need to seek to understand the users and the business goals and objectives, challenge those assumptions, redefine a problem, document those requirements that we're going to have all along the way, and that's going to enable us to create those innovative solutions. So let's take a look and see where we start. So when we apply this, and you've probably seen this before, this is nothing brand new, but a lot of times some of these things get missed when we really talk about the why. Focusing on the what too much can start to skew us towards solutions that aren't really what the users need. Maybe we'll solve a business problem, but it's not going to solve the end user's problem, because we've seen this time and time again. You can build the most amazing product. The design could be absolutely impeccable. The experience can look amazing, but if it doesn't actually solve that user's problem, they're not going to use it. It's going to sit there and collect dust. And that's like the absolute thing you don't want. So if we really start with that what, we know we're going to detail those observations. That is the what. Once we get into the how, we can really start to understand, well, right, is it the degree of difficulty or, sort of what's happening in that world? And the why now is us really making those educated guesses about the users, emotions, motivations, whatever it is. Why do they have to do that? Why is it important? That is going to really lead us to those new innovative ideas. And this is a key that can be missed sometimes. So let's kind of see that in action of how why can kind of change the scenario. And as I kind of put that forward in the beginning, somebody wants a thing, there's been a request, we need to make something. Well, how are we going to go about that? So in this scenario, we have our client stakeholders here saying, hey, we're building an intranet and we know we need an alert feature. That's a must-have. Okay, great. So if we just responded to that and really looked at it as sort of like the what and how, it's like, okay, you want that alerts feature. That's going to have some customization to it. Let's start there. So let's now talking about how does it work? Does it show up on every page? Is it just the home page? Now we're starting to just gather those requirement details about what that alert scenario has to be. But if we actually challenge that right up front, and we're trying to understand the user's perspective, not just what the business wants to accomplish and put out there into the world, but what the user wants, we can start to turn that conversation around. So in this scenario, we're not really trying to ask questions about what the users want, but what if we did? What if we started to challenge those assumptions? So we might hear that same statement and say, well, why do you think that alerts feature is an important part of what you're trying to accomplish? What is the business trying to communicate through that alert? And why is this information important to those end users? What are they trying to do with that information? What are the actions those end users need to take with this? Continuing to kind of iterate through those questions of why to try to get to a different solution. Now we're starting to show that empathy. We're starting to show that, hey, the business has an objective that's great. What are the users supposed to do with that? What can be more effective for them to get that information, which will make them more likely to utilize it. Now we're starting to challenge those assumptions and find new innovative ways to solve it. We actually have to redefine the problem in that way. So if we start having those conversations and we start to kind of eat away at some of that, we want employees to be more informed. We're going to hear answers and responses like this. We want the employees to be informed about important news from corporate, like system outages, flu shots, when those things are available. We do have a separate system that actually handles emergency contacts or emergency information like that. So maybe it's not so much of an alert, but a notification. You might hear those kind of conversations happen. We know that users get so many messages every day. We want to find better ways to foster engagement. We shouldn't force users to view something, the information, we should promote it the right way though. These are some of the responses that we'll want to start to get in here in this scenario, because we know now that we're starting to look at what impacts those users on a day-to-day basis, what they're experiencing, what they're going through in order to now get information to them. And we see this time and time again, users are barraged with so many different types of information. Okay, let's really define what this needs to be. And now our answer back can be very different. So, okay, great. Let's start to look at what SharePoint does out of the box in this scenario. There's a news feature that's really powerful. We can focus different types of communication in different ways. Let's go through that scenario first before we start talking about building something additional. And once we've done that, we've really sort of done the job of not only empathizing with the users, trying to put them at the forefront, we're trying to meet the business goals as well. So if we can combine those things, now we're seeing how powerful the why is, why it matters to kind of continue to ask those questions early on, have that good collaboration, and now find new ways to challenge those past assumptions. This will lead that client to make a strategic, or lead us all to make a better strategic decision. And that's really seeing what design thinking can do when applied to a situation. And this is why I really believe it works. When we start to ask those right questions, we listen, we observe, we can build better things. And we're challenging those assumptions all along the way, finding those new ways to meet those end users' goals, but also keeping the business in mind. That is that, I think, perfect amalgamation of understanding what our users need, but knowing that the business has objectives to accomplish as well. Now you're being seen, as a true leader here. You're not just executing a concept that's been brought to you. but you are actually trying to redefine it and be a better partner in that way. We want to be able to always exceed expectations in anything anybody's building, ultimately design a better product, and of course, build trust all along the way. And I think in any kind of interaction, whether you're working with a direct consultant, a different kind of vendor, a new kind of process, even internally with different areas of the business, you want to build that trust between all those individuals involved, making sure that we're solving new problems. And it's always great when you can kind of get through that and you hear those responses of, yeah, I never really thought about it that way, or I didn't realize we could approach it in such a manner. If we don't go through this process up front, we're not going to really discover those things. And if we just kind of approach it as a straightforward method for every single project, we're going to start to see a lot more cookie cutter solutions rather than truly innovative solutions. And so that's everything that I had here in this presentation. So I know we went through it rather quickly, but I know you got maybe some lunch to get to and things like that. If there are any questions about just design thinking in general, I'm happy to field anything you have.
Thank you, Michael. Nothing has come in yet. No questions or anything.
Okay. All right, great. Well, certainly if anybody thinks of anything, you can always contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you have any other questions, please let us know. And we really thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Michael. That was really a great talk. We are always happy to have you on here. And to everyone on the call, thank you for joining us today. The recording of this session will be available next business day from our virtual events page. You can find that at improving.com/virtual-events. Please keep an eye out for our next virtual lunch and learn. We have one every Friday from noon to 1 Central Time. We look forward to having you join us next time. Have a great weekend, everyone. And thank you again.
Yep. Thank you.